how to buy a house. This is Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots.
Money Mindset.
So we're going to go through 3 things to look for when you're buying a house. And stay right to the end because we're going to give away the book that I got this information from, and you might recognise the person. So stay right to the end. So how to buy a house. So we're going to go through 3 things to look for, and what I use is the pyramid, the how to buy a house pyramid, and basically goes through price, area and size, and we're going to go through each one in turn to help you make a better decision about how to buy a property or buy a house or a flat. So house prices are crazy expensive. So if you're living in London or any major city, you realise that how crazy prices are. So prices have risen 500% since the 1990s, which is nuts. And I write more about this in my book, Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. And basically how the millennial generation have been screwed over with the housing crisis that we're living through at the moment. So if you're a millennial watching this, you might be thinking, I'll never be getting on the housing market. And I talk about this more in the book, and basically it comes down to factors because of the baby boomers. There's much more baby boomers in the UK because there's much more population of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they have more voting rights. So essentially, politically, it's much more beneficial to keep housing prices buoyant and overpriced than actually let markets naturally come down as they should have done in natural markets. And this was done in a number of ways through printing more money called quantitative easing, keeping interest rates low. So interest rates have been historical low, for about 10 years since the last crash in 2008, and also because of help to buy schemes and other schemes that are basically propping up the housing market, which should have, in a normal natural market, should have come down naturally, but they've been kept buoyant. And other factors like planning permission, the green belt, and planning permission for not building more houses when there's a growing population. So many of these things have kept house prices high artificially, which was, I argue in the book, it was because of the voting rights of boomers, because they're more likely to go out and vote and there's more of them compared to millennials. It's much more beneficial for policies to keep house prices buoyant rather than coming down naturally. So that's just a bit of a political start to the video, but essentially that's what I talk about in my book, Millennial Money Mindset. But it is possible to get on the housing market. It is possible to buy a house. So I think everyone should have their own family house if you can. I know it's not affordable for everyone, and that is quite frustrating. I'm now come up to 40, so I've been saving up for a house for many years, and that gave me a good deposit. I also bought with my partner, so that made it much easier to buy a property if there's 2 of you rather than just 1 of you on your own. So there's certain factors that did help me out, which I'm super lucky to and privileged to be in. So I'm actually to be in that position. I bought out of London as well. So we bought in an area this house we just bought 2 weeks ago. So we just moved in, which is exciting news for us. But we moved. It's not in central London, so we couldn't have afforded a place in London. So we went a little bit outside of London, and prices are less high in other places. Oxford's still pretty expensive, but so let's go through the pyramid. So essentially we went through price, so price, area and size. So we touched on a little bit of all of those, but let's go into deep dive into them. So price, so what can you afford? That's maybe the main question to ask. So the way it works, essentially banks will lend you money depending on your salary. So depending on how much you earn is how much you'll be able to afford. So banks will lend you around 3.5 to 4 times your salary, which it kind of sucks if you are not on a high enough salary. You might be doing a really rewarding job like a nurse or a teacher, or you might be taking street clean, which is a really valuable contribution to society, but you're not getting paid as much as a banker or a trader, for instance, and because of that, you can't lend, the bank won't lend you that much more money, which kind of is not necessarily fair, but unfortunately that's the way the world works at the moment. I don't necessarily agree with it, but yeah, I think it's the way that banks lend. So essentially banks will lend you money depending on how likely you are to pay that back. So they'll lend you a mortgage over 25 years, and essentially they will expect that back. And they get a big profit from that. So we got a mortgage for 25 years, and I think for every pound that we borrowed that the bank will lend us, we're paying back about £1.40. So the banks are making loads of money out of lending people a mortgage to buy houses. So they benefit from high house prices, because the higher the house price, the more money they will lend to people and the more money they will make. So yeah, it's a bit of a political and a bit of a, unfortunately it's the way we are, but me on my own can't solve this problem by myself. But so prices, so yeah, look at how much you can afford. So that is going to be probably the first thing you're going to look at your budget. How much can you afford, and how much have you saved? You might be able to get help from your parents, your grandparents, the bank of mum and dad. You might be able to get some money from them to help with your deposit. So the more deposit you have, the more you're going to be able to borrow, and the bank will lend you more. So looking at, first of all, working out how much you can afford, and then working out your budget, and then you can put it into websites like Rightmove on Zoopla and actually work out how much you can borrow. So that's number one, how much you can afford. And obviously the more money you have, the bigger, nicer areas that you can live in. So number one is your budget. Number two is the area you live in. So as we mentioned previously, living in London is crazy expensive. So anyone in London will realise how expensive prices are, and even if you're paying rent, you'll realise how expensive they are. So learning in different areas, working out what's right for you, where you want to live. You might be able to live in a less expensive area. You might be able to live outside of London and commute in to your office. Even with the coronavirus, where everyone's working from home, you might not need to live in the centre of London. You might be able to work from a location outside of London, so you can work somewhere else. You can actually buy, another point is you can buy somewhere not in London. The first property that I bought was in Bristol, so I didn't live in that property, I rented it out. So I bought somewhere and I didn't live there, and that was a good way to get round of the kind of crazy house prices in London. So looking at the area, a good thing to look for is if your circumstances. So for instance, you might not have kids, and the area you're looking at is in a catchment area for really good schools, and because of this catchment area, it pushes the prices up much more. So that might be a way to get around it. You might be looking in an area that's not in good school catchment areas, and because you don't have kids, that's going to benefit you. You might look in an area depending on your work, so the closer you are to public transport, the more price, the higher the price is going to be. If you drive to work, for instance, you might not need to be next to a transport link. You might not need to be near a tube station. So that's another thing, looking at the area. The best thing to do, make a list of the things that you value the most, and it's all about compromise. This triangle is kind of looking at there's no perfect area, or there's no perfect property within your budget. It's about compromising, it's about working out what's right for you. So that is location, so where you're going to be, the area you're going to live in. And then thirdly, the size. So how big a property do you want to have? Do you have kids? You're going to need bedrooms for them, you might need areas for them to play in. You might be buying on your own, so then you might need only one bedroom or a studio flat. If you're buying the two of you, you might need somewhere bigger to live in. Working from home as well is a big factor these days. So do you need office space? Do you need more space to work in? Do you need maybe a dining room to eat in. So we're all working from home with coronavirus, and you might need to separate your work from your leisure. You might want to watch TV and relax somewhere else than you work. Building a list of basically what's going to be the best for you and coming to a compromise. So just to summarise how to buy a house, looking at the 3 factors, so looking at the price, looking at the area and looking at the size, and then with this triangle coming up with a compromise. So where did I get this book from? So you might recognise Phil Spencer. So it is from his book, essentially How to Buy Your First Home, and it's quite a good summary on essentially it gives you a few good tips and techniques on looking for your first home. So my name's Neil Doig, this has been How to Buy a House. We've used the How to Buy a House pyramid, which is price, size and location, and coming up with those 3 is coming up with your perfect home and the compromise for you. So my name's Neil Doig, I'm the founder of Money Tips. We're different, we offer financial coaching, we offer money coaching to help you make better decisions with your money. We empower you to make better decisions with your money, and that means you save thousands of pounds from paying expensive financial advice fees. I'm the author of Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. It's available on Amazon, and the creator of the card game Football Formation, Asset Allocation, which teaches you how to build a portfolio that's right for you. Please like, please subscribe, and please tell a friend about Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruit, you need the roots. Thanks so much for watching.
Money mindset.